bring you up first, okay? Did you do it? Were you here for the sound check? No. You project. You use your outdoor voice. Hello, everyone. I'm just chatting with our musical entertainment. No, I'm just kidding. You bring an instrument into the room. I mean, you know. Welcome again to our second faculty. This is kind of loud. Can you turn this down a little, just a tiny bit? Is it loud? Is it loud? Okay, never mind then. Welcome to the second Faculty Talk of the week, second Faculty Talk of the summer. We're glad you're here. Faculty Talks happen every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening from now until mid-August. And every night we have the writers and visual artists who are teaching in the particular week give artist talks and do readings. They're wonderful events. We do Q&As afterwards. So if you're here for longer than a week, this could be your home for Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So I encourage you to come as often as you can. My name is David Simpson. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm glad you're here. Tonight we're going to hear from poet Rowan Ricardo Phillips. Let's have a hand for Rowan. We're going to hear from painter Pete Hocking, one of our and from writer Joan Wickersham. We have a great lineup for you tonight. A bit of housekeeping before we start. Rowan and Joan's books will be for sale at the back of the room at the end of the evening, and they will also be signing books, so feel free to peruse and buy the books. There's more books by other faculty members and former fellows and sort of members of the greater Falk community available in our little bookstore in the middle of the gallery next door. I encourage you to give it a look. Also encourage you to take a look at our summer exhibition called Edge Condition. It's curated by former fellow Matt Bollinger and features work by 20 or so former Falk fellows. It's a great show. You should check it out. What else? Big shout out, as always, to East End Books for helping us manage our bookstore here at the Work Center. They're just around the corner down on Commercial, so if you take a look, it's a great little bookstore. Also want to thank the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and Cape Cod 5 Foundation for helping us support our summer public programming. A couple other little things. The restrooms are still down the hall, and we have assisted listening devices. If you need one, just check with Sarah or Hannah at the back of the room and they'll help you get set up with that. We also have cushions back in a couple of bins back there. If you feel like, just help yourself and grab one. Put it back though, don't take it home. And finally, as always, please turn your cell phones to silent or off. And with that, I'd like to invite my colleague Hannah to come up and introduce Rowan Ricardo Phillips.
Is this working? Cool. All right, I have the pleasure of introducing Rowan Ricardo Phillips. Rowan Ricardo Phillips is a poet, author, screenwriter, academic, journalist, and translator. He is the author of 6 books, all published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux, including The Ground, Heaven, Living Weapon, and his latest book of poems, Silver. In her review of Phillips' debut collection, Evie Shockley writes, "The poems in The Ground carry the authoritative descriptions and rhythms of Derek Walcott, the philosophical and symbolic flights of Wallace Stevens, the subtle humor and cosmopolitanism of Rita Dove, but in a language whose musical blend of the contemporary and the timeless is all Phillips's own. These poems assert cycles. They repeat, recur, and return, but where we end up is not where we started." Phillips has been the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the Nicholas Guillen Outstanding Book Award, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, the PEN/ESPN Award for Literary Sports Writing, a fellowship from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the Penn Joyce Osterwheel Award for Poetry, a Whitting Award, and the GLCA New Writers Award. His work has also been a finalist for the National Book Award, the Griffin International Poetry Prize, the Los Angeles Times Book Award, and the NAACP Outstanding Book Award for Poetry. He is a distinguished professor of English at Stony Brook University, the poetry editor of The New Republic, and the editor of the Princeton series of contemporary poets. Please join us in welcoming Rowan.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to keep this quick so we can get to Pete and Joan. But I'd like to dedicate this reading to a friend from New York who unexpectedly showed up, Brad Whitehurst. This is for you, wherever you may be. He just showed up from New York, so you'll recognize him as being in, long pants. An excuse for mayhem. The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of the Father, the kingdom of Christ, house of the Father, the city of God, the heavenly Jerusalem, the holy place, paradise of life, life everlasting, the joy of the Lord, crown of life, crown of justice, crown of glory, incorruptible crown, the great reward, the inheritance of Christ, eternal inheritance, the immutable change, the belt of Venus, the sublime blue hour of the voice, the mute light, mute church, mute choice. Boys. We'd cut school like knives through butter, the three of us, Peter, Stephen, and I, to play just about all the music we knew, which meant that from 9 in the morning till Steve's parents, the ever-patient Murtaughs, would come home from work, I played guitar, Peter played bass, and Steve, who'd end up becoming a guitarist by trade when we went separate ways to separate schools and separate states, Steve at this point played the drums. We dreamed of power trios and powered our way through song after song, including ones Steve and I wrote like, "Hey Regina," and the lamentably titled "String Her Up." Sometimes we tried out some Yes, a long Hey Joe. The stereo phaser was my signature sound. I'd bend in and out of notes and ply arpeggios only to solo over them. Tapped, frowned through anything in a major key, felt my way home on Steve's map of snares, Pete's rope. We'd play an entire Zeppelin album, usually the first or second, then stray by chance into the longer, later songs, like bees that float down and drown in a pool. We'd break for lunch and then get back at it, as though we had a gig to get ready for, or a demo to cut, the cassette deck rolling its eyes as it whirred round and round. Peter, as is the nature of bassists, held the tunes together and kept things light. Years later, I assumed he was dead. My Telecaster glares at me at night now, from inside the hard case by my bed, and the calluses on my fingertips have long since softened. The 6-minute solos at some point became poems it took 2 months minimum to make seem seamless. Steve, in the meantime, thrived in the triangle, became Stevie, married Emily. Pete I know less about. He posts on Facebook cheerfully about the light, the great light that glows in all of us. Sends the occasional white dove in the occasional shared shot, a sun resting on a cloud like a pearl in its mooted gray shell. Nostalgia courts me. I'm nearing 40. We were boys, and I should let us be. But nostalgia spreads quickly through the ashes of our youth, making ferned fires out of blue beliefs. When the dark would come, we'd show each other our blisters, the painful white whorls peeling, our red palms upwards, outstretched and unread. Even Homer nods. You can be a mother who knows a God, and you can ask him for some magic armor, a shield the width of Saturn's widest rings, some helmet in the new or ancient style. Fill your arms with defenses for your child. Take the peacock feather you've been offered and plant it in that helmet's crown. Or keep it for yourself to use as a pen. Note, this was the only option you were offered. Stylist or witness. Witness with stylus. So that you'd circle down the drain with death, mourning in either silence or sound bites, surrounded by silence and sound bites, like this having been polished to shine in the normal way things shine these days. A dull lull, the type of insufficient glare we used to call out on sight as useless glow, but now in new darkness we find a need for, a consolation of presence. As when my mother passed me the soft shield, the breastplate like rice paper, the helmet bright as pirate can be, we already knew that this was part of the old cycle, that I would die soon without a weapon, and she'd live on, and we'd do this again and again and again, without ever knowing we were the weapons ourselves, stronger than steel, story, and hydrogen. Here in America, where we wonder, still, after everything that's happened, why anyone bothers to read the classics. Love song. Not who or what you love, but that you love. That to stand there or sit there to simply be, this is hard. To look across from you, where someone else or no one or both may or may not be, this is hard. This is hard because you love and have learned not to love. You say love, say you're filled with love, even to the edge of doom and all that. But how perverse and proximal love can be. Like a volcano emptying itself onto the small town sprouting in its shade. Hate ruling your continent. Hate burning your air. Hate sitting beside you under a perfect moon, leaning in like love would as the moon fades into the blue whiteness of dawn. We all share that awed silence while the woke birds sing. We're all savages. The peacock. Music for when the music is over is what a poem is. There's no music in a poem. Just the imaginary composer breathing beneath the deep wreck, the curves of that glorious alphabet, resilient as bioluminescence stuck in the seafloor. There's something to it, how poems pretend to sing, as a peacock pretends in the wide span of its plumage that there's no end to it. The far stars of galaxies and its ocelli gazed, and gazing as one. The first fissions finally arriving at the listener, who makes sense of it sooner or later. History. It's late. History promises you a kiss when she comes to bed. So you say goodnight. You're tired and you can't keep your eyes open, so you called it surprisingly early. She, like every night this summer, stays up to watch her shows. Later, she woke you accidentally with a light you thought was dawn, but was just the white haze of her cell. You stayed half awake in the lit darkness, thinking she owed you something. A mere kiss, waiting, one eye half open, like the flesh in a shell sensing a swimmer pass. The light turned off, as if it never happened. And nothing came to you because you were owed absolutely nothing. Not even the growing indifference in her voice. ¿Dónde está? I'm sure I have a poem in here that's called Did I not write this poem? Is it not in this book? I'm pretty sure both I wrote it and it's in this book. Now this setup is putting a lot of pressure on this poem, but I feel like reading it. Where are you? Huh. Curious. Is anyone here from Ohio? All right, well then I'm going to read another poem. And this is for you. A poem I've written seems to have disappeared. It's a very Borgesian type of thing, but hey, you know. So this is for you. It's called The Once and Future King of Ohio. Maybe that's you. The once and future king of Ohio. Dawn. 2 roosters stud the side of the road. One of them is dead. The other stands there stiff in the car's sudden breeze, staring out across the hilly Ohio highway. Skyward towards that something slight of bright reds and pinks. A pallid, rooster-feathered hue, as silent as the rooster standing and as distant as the rooster on its side. We drove by, my guide and I, too quickly to know if one rooster was waiting for the other, or which had been waiting, or if they'd planned to cross the road together when suddenly something went terribly wrong, either at the end of having crossed it or simply, as happens, during the wait. The whole Ohio highway seems to know, though. Like the gate of heaven, you see a death as a light or a shining, shunning Darkness knows heaven without actually being heaven. Being rather just a border, so still some part of our plausible world of parts, living and dead, male and female, color and color, belief and belief. There's really no reason to believe or not to believe what you see when you see it. But when at speed I saw those two roosters trying to figure out what was next for them as the distances we traveled on the 661 swallowed them whole with wheat, I looked from my passenger seat into the car's rearview mirror and saw nothing that was neither heaven nor Ohio. As the horses stirred and the steeples slept and the state flattened out like a mirror. And am I not a mirror for that mirror? So funny enough, the wonderful writers I'm doing a workshop with today, they had to come in where a poem started and ended with a punchline of a joke. Two roosters stood at the side of the road. Why did the chicken cross the road? Just going to read a few more poems from Silver and kind of catch up to now. This is a two-fisted engine. You see, the funny thing is that, both Joan and Jay recently saw me read at Harvard, so I'm trying to kind of stay away. I don't want to I don't want to look over so you guys be like, oh, he just read that. So I don't think I've read anything yet that you've read. Now I'm pretty sure I read this, but you're gonna have to just ride it out. I feel like reading this. I want to make people sad. I'm the only poet reading today, so I mean, if I don't make you sad, am I really doing my job? And trust me, this is going to make you sad. These are two poems called Prelude and then Postlude. Prelude. 1. My grandmother saw it coming and left. I'd already left. It came late and swift, like a tidal wave mistaken for a wave. Came not as a note, but as an octave. Black-keyed and mangled, searching the hospice only to find she'd left without notice. The soul clapped from her body, masked by death, death hiding from death, and finding no sign of her in the high cheekbones or skin, strode out on a cough into the evening. 2. In the weeks between her death and being laid to rest, life became COVID-19. Both the living and dead shared one air. Then the service came, and I was not there. I watched from the safe distance of an app as my mother and uncle massed among the massed few in a pewless space, made peace with the orphans who'd come to take their place. Looking out at them was like looking at the world through the bars of a cage. 3. And now, high on a slope near Van Cortlandt, the immortelles of perfect pitch sing Ina Harris to sleep. Her shade goes there to listen, bathed in the scent of ilex, palm, linden, kapok. It is Easter and she is dressed in her lilac best and hat. Her daughter crossed bridge and Bronx and plague to bring to her. She is 2 steps ahead of this pentameter as it follows her through the flexed valley of the shadow of death. This elegy which, like all of them, is so useless and late. My grandmother saw it coming and she left. Postlude. Her hospital bed, her favorite red gown, the one embroidered with small purple and gold flowers trellising the unknown infection riddling every inch of her. Her hair brushed back but not braided today, the lunch tray remaindered to a corner. Plastic pudding cup, nectarine, jaded pillbox, all hollowed out. Verbless, she sang, didn't sing, and sang as she cross-faded to an invisible dimension seen only on the back of her winced lids. The flowers sitting on the windowsill. Those photos pinned to the wall, the turquoise vase, the unused frames, suddenly they seemed important. Where would they all go? I surprised myself that, just for a second, I deemed those things to be of value in themselves, all that flared bric-a-brac, and felt ashamed. I held her hand in search of some resolve, but her hand trembled as my hand trembled. I was bad at this. I wanted to prove that I wasn't. My mind reassembled and for a moment shut down. I joined her where Charon sat at a makeshift table killing time with his dog in the foyer playing dominoes by himself, waiting under the faint spectral light of a koi star. She was there only in the most craven sense of the word there, as when someone says, "I'll be there soon," when they're still in New Haven. She squeezed my hand and whistled from the screen. I rubbed her hand with my free hand and kissed it, and then kissed her warm forehead again as I pried my hand from her grip and missed my last chance not to have done that. I looked at the time and saw I had a minute left. Then, after having done all the math, took a deep breath that I can never take back. Far away was a better me who would chant, she saw it coming, so she left. But my car was waiting downstairs, silver and fine free. So I left. The rental purred as I turned it on. And just like that, she was gone. I'll read two more poems. This one is called The Triumph of Song. The Triumph of Song. I mean, the only zone I think I might know, and by know, I mean this thing hasn't quite killed me yet, is the triumph of song. All my poems mean that, I think, really. This is the edge of my observable universe. I can't see what doesn't sing, or what I haven't coaxed from some notes out of air. Like the first time I must have heard Strawberry Fields Forever. I was 12 and cupped the soft black sponges to my ears while sitting cross-legged on a friend's twin bed as the janky copy of the cassette copied over my memory of where I was, whom I was with, and even who I was. All I remember is the song. All that confident lack of confidence, which is what writing poems is really like. The dark blood zoning forwards and backwards in the brain. The heart like grass in a bowl. And the burning horizon's sharp swagger, all of it. Part physics, part faith, part void. So here, you know what? I'm teaching a workshop on endings. So I'm going to read 2 poems, but it's 1 poem. It has the same title. This book begins with and ends with the same poem. It's called The First and Final Poem is the Sun. The person who I dedicated this reading to, Brad, he picked up the book, he bought it, I signed it, he looked and he saw that, he points to it and he goes, Stevens. Fuck you, Brad. Yeah. The first and final poem is The Sun. I love Brad. I just realized this is being recorded. I love you, Brad. I love you very, very much. The first and final poem is The Sun. The first and final poem is The Sun, which means that the poetry is a ritual that the sun organizes and arranges. But aside from the other is the singular essential thing, and is one thing among billions upon billions of things just like it, is known by a name which is not its true name, and so scours the earth in search of what it may have been in the beginning of things, and may still be in the end, when time, that invention of the mind, finally reveals not the meaning, but the meaningfulness of this mystery we call life. The first and final poem is The Sun. Not the meaning, but the meaningfulness of this mystery we call life. When time, that invention of the mind, finally reveals what it may have been in the beginning of things and may still be in the end, and so scours the earth in search of what is known by a name which is not its true name, and is one thing among billions upon billions of things just like it. But aside from the other is the singular essential thing, which means that poetry is a ritual that the sun organizes and arranges. The first and final poem is The Sun. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be thinking about the sun as the ritual arranger of poetry, or I can't even say it like you did, but that's sticking with me already, so thank you. I'm going to introduce our next writer. Joan Wickersham is the author of The News from Spain and The Suicide Index, a National Book Award finalist. Her fiction has appeared in Best American Short Stories, Best American Non-Required Reading, and many other publications. Her newest book is a poetic and philosophical meditation on mortality called No Ship Sets Out to Be a Shipwreck, and will be published in fall 2024. Of Wickersham's forthcoming book, the writer Marian Winnick, who taught here at Falk in 2022, writes, "You may think you don't want to read a book about visiting a 17th century shipwreck in a museum in Stockholm. That's exactly how Joan Wickersham felt about going to this museum in the first place. Then she became obsessed and went back many times and wrote this stunning book about her own losses, about the reliquary impulse, about shipworms and skulls and widows. And no, you probably won't be able to read it just once. Maybe you have encountered something like this before, but I have not." In the course of writing No Ship Sets Out to Be a Shipwreck, Joan collaborated with the photographer Adam Davies to create 2 online mixed media shows, one for our work center here in Provincetown, combining audio readings of her poems with Adam's monumental photographs. Joan has received the Ploughshares Cohen Award for Best Short Story and has been awarded grants by the National Endowment for the Arts, the American Scandinavian Foundation, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and residencies at MacDowell and Yaddo. She also writes a regular op-ed column for the Boston Globe and has taught at Harvard, Emerson, the University of Massachusetts Boston, and the Bennington Writing Seminars. Please join us in welcoming Joan.
Thank you, and I'm so happy to be back here again at the Fine Arts Work Center, and I have a wonderful group of people in my workshop. I'm really honored to be on this faculty, and I'm really excited to be sharing the evening with Rowan and Pete. So, well, Marion Winnick said a lot of the things that I was going to say to introduce this. This is a new book that's coming out in September called No Ship Sets Out to be a Shipwreck. And it's basically a collection of short pieces, poems and short prose pieces that was ignited by this visit to the Vasa Museum in Stockholm. And just a brief, I'll just tell you a little bit briefly about the Vasa. It was built in 1628 to be the most fearsome, scary warship of its day. It was just bristling with sculptures and cannons, and it was painted, and it was supposed to really be a great weapon. And it sailed out into Stockholm Harbor. Everyone in Stockholm came out and stood on the cliffs to watch this great launching of the ship. And a little puff of wind blew, and the ship just fell over and sank in the harbor in front of everybody. And it was just an enormous, embarrassing disaster. The ship was over-designed and badly conceived. And so the ship was under the harbor for more than 300 years. And in the middle of the 1950s, a man named Anders Franzén, who had been searching for it, found the ship. And he had theorized that it would be intact if it could be found, because the Baltic has such a low saline content that shipworms can't survive, and so they don't eat. If a ship sinks in Stockholm Harbor, it's not going to get eaten. And so he came up with this crazy idea to raise the ship and build a museum around it. And so my husband, Jay, had read about this in National Geographic when he was a little kid, and he had always thought if he wanted to go, if he went to Stockholm, he wanted to see the ship. So he dragged me to see the ship, which I had no interest in. And we waited in line for about an hour outside the building. And then we got inside, and you walk through 3 double doors, and then suddenly you're in this dark space the size of a hockey rink. And it's almost completely filled with this gorgeous, mysterious, black wooden ship. And the ship is like the ghost of itself. It's just astonishing. I'd never seen anything like it, and I just became obsessed. So I went back to Stockholm. I think I made 9 trips to Stockholm between 2013 and 2019, and I started to write these pieces. I actually started to write them when I was teaching here one week. I thought I was going to write an op-ed column, and what came out was something quite different, and then I just kept going. So I'm going to read, the book is called No Ship Sets Out to be a Shipwreck, and I'm just going to read some of the pieces. The first one is called The Shipbuilder's Widow. The shipbuilder died in the middle of the ships being built, so his wife took over. His widow took over was in charge of it. Oops. The shipbuilder's widow. You had his death and then some months before you understood what he had left you. That fucking ship. I can't presume to know your voice, but that one is my mother's. She would have understood that part. The ship that was supposed to be so great, such glory, sunk. The thing your husband built to make his name, to keep you safe. The things he promised you could count on. Him, the ship, his reputation, gone. And you still here, no longer a wife or widow of a master shipbuilder, but something new. A woman people point at, pity, blame, a culprit, married to disgrace, surviving and wrecked. Your life changed in an hour. Can you imagine, my mother would have said? I imagine her saying it to my father years ago, before she knew their ending, If they had gone to Sweden, they might have stood before the dim carved diorama, you in your nun-like widow's weeds greeting the king who came to see you and the ship when it was finished. That valiant moment, you ennobled, having carried on after losing your husband, not knowing all you still could lose. My father loved boats. My mother loved a drama. She would have asked him if he could imagine. He would have been silent. Maybe he couldn't, or maybe he could, and that was why he didn't want to. But here's the thing, that can you imagine? The question she would have asked in the museum on that imaginary visit long before my father killed himself and left her with the wreckage of his life, his business. She kept asking. All her life, before his death and after, she looked at other people's lives and their disasters, cheating husbands, drowning kids, sober friends who started calling late at night and slurred their words. She'd call and ask me if I could imagine. She wanted an answer. Yes, no, could I? Couldn't she by now? Those moments when it goes from being this kind of life to that kind, don't we all have them? That fucking ship, she would have said, if she'd been you, or if she and I had ever had a chance to go to Sweden before she got sick, before she couldn't walk, couldn't see, before she ended up in one of those places she had made me swear I'd never let her go to, and I had sworn and meant it. If she and I had ever gone to Sweden, we might have stood together before that diorama. Your carved likeness, which probably is nothing like you, carved by someone who never saw you and only thought to freeze you in that ceremony. The visit from the king, the ship in the cradle, the dignity with which you tried to finish what your husband started without yet knowing what it was. So I'm going to read one now called National Geographic, January 1962. You still remember the blue of it, that issue and its oceans, the junks of Hong Kong Harbor, the lemon shark, its frantic, deadly eye, the divers with their fins and bubbles somewhere off Key Largo. Off Peru at night, the men of Easter Island lured fish with torches and traded everything for cigarettes. Here the story told you dreams foreshadowed the future. You were 6 and a reader. You told me once you didn't remember anything. Another time you said you could remember sitting under the table in the dining room trying not to hear them fighting and the sound of your mother crying. I imagine you down there, reading and rereading the story of Vasa, memorizing every picture, puzzling over the order. The healing ship, the sinking ship, the risen ship, the sunken ship, the battered risen ship again, clinging to the table leg, pretending it was a mast. Okay. This one is one of the exhibits in the museum is the bones of the people who died in the wreck and the bones that were retrieved when they found the ship. Most people got off because it sank in the harbor. A lot of people were picked up by little boats, and some people were able to swim, but they think that about 35 or 50, between 35 and 50 people died in the wreck, and some of these bones are on display in the museum. And with 1 or 2 of them, what they've done is they've made a kind of a model of the head and the face because they want to show what these people might have looked like based on the contours of the skulls. So this one is called The Owner of the Skull. I mean you, not the museum or the Swedish government, but you, the man who lived in it, in whom it lived. Whatever stories you had heard of shipwrecks, you didn't hear this one. You knew in the violent suck and torrent that this was final. Maybe you thought of heaven, Christ, whatever you'd been taught. You never thought of a diver. You never thought they'd build another man using your scaffolding. They've given him a face and hair, some freckles, moles. You wouldn't know yourself. His name, they say, is Philip. The quotes marking the place where knowledge leaves off and fiction begins. No one knows your name. More people see him in a day than saw you in your lifetime. He lives in your bones, lays claim to your possessions, your clothes, your knife sheath, and your coins, 4 of them. He's taken everything you had. He, they say, still had 2 milk teeth, hidden behind permanent teeth in his lower jaw. Those tiny pointed secrets that only your tongue knew and never could have told because they were so much a part of you that you never knew you had them. He had 2 milk teeth, the label says, meaning Philip, meaning you. The book on my desk is open to the pictures of your skull and Philip, the wrong blue eyes staring from your sockets. Maybe being found, restored, is just a different way of being lost. Come back, I want to say to my father and my mother. Be who you were and not who I try to make of you. This one is called the Pelican Button. One of the exhibits in the museum was a glass case, and the only thing in the case was this tiny little button, silver button. No one would have looked closely enough to decipher this tiny story in relief. The pelican pecking its breast and drawing blood to feed its young. A Christian allegory. At least that's what the label says. Who made this cryptic silver thing? What garment was it meant to hold together? A thing this small is a secret. Even in the lighted case, I can't make out the shapes. I have to take on faith that what I'm told is here, that the bird's self-murder is an act of mercy, that the young would want this blood and drink it, that every wreck saves someone. Okay. So now we'll have a little change. The discovery of the Vasa was a big deal for PR. It was like the most exciting media event of its day. People did all these kinds of promotions and events and stunts. So this one is called Questions for the 6 Beauty Queens Arriving in the Little Rowboat. Who sent you? Who told you to put on those gowns and come across the water to visit the Vasa in June of 1961, 6 weeks after she was raised? What had you said that morning to your husband, boyfriend, roommate, mother, younger sister when you rose from the breakfast table? Did you need help to get the gown on, the heavy velvet skirt, fitted bodice, lace ruff? Did you walk to the boat landing, or did someone give you a ride? Who kissed you, beat you, lit your cigarettes, thought about you while masturbating, told you you had a future in the movies? What did you talk about on the way across the harbor? Did you know about the Bay of Pigs, or that the Danish barber's assistants had been conducting the world's longest strike but had finally now reached a settlement and returned to work? Did you like each other? Was there a farm girl, a factory girl, a wild girl, a countess, a scholar, and a sweet maternal one, the way there would have been if this had been a novel about 6 beauty queens? What was the contest that had selected and ordered you? The one with the big crown was the winner, clearly, but what about the rest of you? In what order did you rank? Did you mind? What did you say once you climbed the ladder and stood on the scaffolding erected on or next to the Vasa? Who listened? Who cared? What happened after you climbed back down the ladder, got into the little boat again, and pulled away from the ship? Where did you go from there? What would you remember years later of this day? Did you keep on being beautiful? For how long? In whose opinion? Okay, this one is called King David on the Stern. and it has a little epigraph from Psalm number 39, which is, "For I am a stranger with thee and a sojourner. O spare me a little that I may recover my strength before I go hence and be no more seen." And what it is, on the cover of the book, there's a very beautiful photograph that Adam Davies took, which you can't see, but I just want to show you that he did it, and you can look at it more closely. But it's a picture of the stern of the Vasa, and there are these beautiful carvings. Some of them are biblical, and so this is King David on the stern. "Your deadly mentor rival isn't here, neither is his son whom you loved, or the giant whose killing made you a hero, or the woman you fell for when you watched her bathing, or the husband you stole her from and sent off to die in a war. It's just you now, hanging out alone above the rudder with your harp, standing on the head of a monster, begging God to spare you a little longer. Your songs are written, your sins committed, and they are always with you. How much time do I have left? You knew all along that this was the question. You know it still. Everything is hanging. Everything's arrested. Your crown, its blurry, worn-out opulence, the muscles of your forearm, your anxious, tired, sideways glance, the broken strings of your harp. You can't know what's below you, but you have a sense that even in this stillness there is movement, that you are sinking, or that something else is climbing toward you. You know there's a lion down there somewhere." This one is called the infrared camera, and what it is, there's an exhibit in the museum that measures, as you walk toward it, it films you and does a kind of color scan of your body heat to show you how much heat and moisture you're giving off, because they're very interested in the impact, the environmental impact that visitors have on the ship. So this begins with the text of a sign that's hanging next to that screen, and the signs, I'll just read that and then just launch into the piece. "A million bright lights. Vasa is affected by your body heat, your breath and your clothing, which may be wet from rain. The museum receives 1 million visitors annually. The ship hall accommodates at most 1,500 people at any time, at any one time. A person gives off approximately 75 watts of heat. The display uses a heat camera to show how warm you are. Too warm, I know already, but the camera insists on looking and the screen on making me look. There, that glowing yellow blur, moving warily, helplessly closer, is me. The parts that are bare, my hands, my calves, the back of my neck, are even hotter, red. We are at the bottom, the darkest part of the museum, where the keel withdraws into private, black-shadowed blackness, the ship's underside, the hidden part it rests on. All the times when my heat has been too much, loving and scared I might be doing damage, loving and told I'm not the only one who loves, my mother and my father, my sister, a man. The hand held up to stop me, the camera that sees, the screen that shows, the sign that spells it out. The ship, the massive, fragile warship, is sinking. And when it sinks, we will have sunk it. It cannot bear the breath and heat of all the lovers who imagine they are in it, on it, drowning in it. The sign reads like an accusation, but maybe it's just true. We are here, and the ship is here to be looked at, and nothing is impervious or harmless. Look at us all in our clothes that may be wet with rain. And then I'll just read one more, which is the last one in the book. And it's called Shipworm, Teredo Navalis. Your life is tunnels. You burrow in, eat your way home, eliminate, fornicate, all in the same wet den. You're a fraternity boy who never leaves the house, eating, drinking, shitting, releasing sperm. When that gets boring, you turn female, filling the tunnel inside you with sperm you suck from the tunnel you live in. Pure orgy. In the end, the place is trashed. Holes in the walls, the floors, the ceiling. Are you happy now? Don't you just want more? Or maybe what looks like decadence is just plain toil. Those frenzied wooden Gomorrahs are really testaments to your efficiency. Silos full of grain, hives full of honey, stores and warehouses piled high with manufactured goods. If holes are your product, then your negatives are positives. You build by subtraction, add by taking away. Every emptiness is an achievement. Your name shows up in every Vasa story, both names, shipworm, Teredo nivalis. The Linnaean taxonomic like a graduate degree, trailing your name so that we will take you seriously. Who wouldn't after seeing photographs of what you can do to a waterlogged piece of timber in 16 weeks? What would Vasa have looked like after 300 years of your devoted attention? You're the cockroach that didn't eat Cincinnati, the typhoon that swerved before it hit the island. What kept you away was salt. You need it, love it, crave it. Without it, there's nothing to talk about, nothing to eat, nothing to drink, nowhere to live. The Baltic's too bland. Plenty of other shipwrecks in other oceans, seasoned just the way you like them. As a child, I learned of death and worms together. Some kid on a bicycle who rode to my house and sang the song about the hearse and the worms that would play pinochle on my snout. I'd never heard of pinochle, but I got the idea. We were meat. We were helpless. My life, the eternal day-by-dayness of it, was little and would end. Everything, the sparkles in the driveway, the taste of the washcloth, the quiver of the soft-boiled egg, the strange odor of my parents' pillows, my left thumb with its bulge from sucking, would go. Everything I thought I owned was rented. My parents' "we'll take care of yous" were true as far as they went, but they didn't go all the way. There was another world my parents hadn't mentioned. Maybe they didn't know. I was afraid to tell them or to ask. The kid on the bicycle knew. The song knew. There were worms, and we were helpless. Always, all of us, no exceptions. You, shipworm, Teredo nivalis, less than 1/10 of an inch from end to end, blind and mindless, relentlessly debauched or relentlessly industrious. You eat what you want, and you didn't eat this ship. You didn't want meat without salt. Creation myths need snakes, some devils, a tempter. A resurrection story turns on a worm, a master of corruption who miraculously fails to corrupt. How fitting that you connoisseur of, you maker of, you lover of holes, you great creator of nothing, should fill this story with your absence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. That was amazing. So excited to read the whole book when it comes out. We're going to hear from Pete Hocking next. Pete Hocking is an interdisciplinary artist, activist, and teacher who lives and works on the Outer Cape. He's interested in the ways that individual human identities are inscribed into human and non-human landscapes, and ultimately in the ways that the non-human world defies human intervention. From 1997 to 2022, he taught at Rhode Island School of Design. From 2003 to 2021, he taught in Goddard College's MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts program. He was director of RISD's Office of Public Engagement from 2007 to 2011, and associate dean of the college and director of the Swearer Center for Public Service at Brown University from 1988 to 2005. Hocking is a founding board member of Provincetown Commons, an economic development center for the creative economy. Much of his work is instigated by the radical joy of witnessing nature. About a 2021 show of Pete's paintings titled Leaving Broken Hearts Behind, the Provincetown Independent wrote, Hocking remains a bit of a magician when it comes to depicting the outer Cape landscape through precisely measured and perfectly articulated tracks of paint. Step in close and his canvases dissolve, step back and take in the relaxing balm of the scene. We here at FOC are thrilled to be in community with Pete. Please join us in welcoming him to the stage.
Hey everyone. It's such a delight to be at the Work Center, and I want to say thank you collectively to the staff who have made the last 2 days just wonderful. And I also just want to say I'm humbled to be in conversation with Rowan and Joan, and what they just did is what I'm yearning to do. And tonight, I love being here because I have a degree, a Master of Fine Arts in Interdisciplinary Arts. I also have a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And this is a place where the spirit of those two things are always present to me. And I try to take these occasions to bring those two parts of myself together. So this is a bit of a fake out. I'm not going to do a traditional kind of artist talk. I do have some slides with paintings that I'm going to show, but mostly I want to share a set of provocations. The world is full of self-help books for people who aspire to be artists, but when one's identity is intertwined with the idea of being an artist, there's not a lot out there when things go off the rails. So I don't know exactly what it is I'm doing or what I've written here. It may be an artist talk on a Tuesday night in Provincetown, or it may be the outline of a self-help book. In any case, let's get this going. The title of it is, oh, come on. Oh, gave you a preview. So I'm going through something. The slides at the beginning and these slides are recent works. In 2008, Pluto entered Capricorn for the first time since 1762. As someone whose sun sign is Capricorn, I felt it hard. Pluto destroys in order to rebuild. In many ways, my life is unrecognizable to what it was before 2008. As Pluto finally leaves Capricorn this year, I'm trying to make sense of the profound changes of the last 16 years and to take stock of the work that's yet to come. Over this period, I've extricated myself from a surprising number of dysfunctional and toxic relationships. In each case, the other person or institution claimed to have no power over me, which is a particularly pernicious kind of gaslighting, because it diminishes your confidence without you really seeing it. Indeed, I didn't recognize the pattern until recently. I am a slow learner. And I allowed the repeated discomfort of these relationships to disconnect me from myself. It's not surprising that it took an acute crisis of confidence in my art practice last winter to force me to reckon with the dynamic. I was disassociating, which for me is a kind of psychic detachment from what's happening around me. It's a retreat from myself, feeling literally like my consciousness has been pulled from my body. In my artwork, it manifested as a decline in what I'm seeing as poetry in my paintings. I want to create paintings that are both ineffable and unparaphrasable, essentially conveying experience that can't be summed up. But my work had become increasingly literal. Well, the kind of painting I do involves depiction. I'm not interested in verisimilitude or exactness. I want to convey feeling. That's a tall order for anyone, and I'm aware it might be something beyond my ability. It may even be a conceit. But whatever it is, it requires me to be fully in my body. I finally came to see that if I want poetry in my work, I need to find my way back. So one of the first things come on, you can do it. There. So this winter, I returned to my body by making paintings of my body. And these are 3 self-portraits. The 2 that are portrait orientation, Blue Stripe and New Boots, are currently in an exhibit that David, who's sitting in the audience, curated, that's in Harwich. And they're finished. And the square is one that's in process. It's not done, but I thought I'd put it in. These are views of my body retrospectively. These are retrospective self-portraits. And they're intended to be about the gaze, and the gaze as I've experienced it of other people objectifying me. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Oh. These are 2 recent landscape paintings that relate to what I'm going to talk about next. I've recently started thinking of paintings as talismans. People have told me that my paintings allow them to hold onto a place they love, to feel it near when they cannot be near. That's one definition of talisman, the art of imbuing an object with magic so that it can be carried. That would make me a magician rather than a poet. And I'm not a magician. But I am interested in enchantment. And I'm interested in the transcendental, how a sense of divinity can be found in our experience of nature. In a recent article in Smithsonian titled, "What Does It Mean to Be a Witch Today?" I found some provocation. Quote, "Indeed, one of the widely accepted definitions of magic within the community, which comes from British occultist Diane Fortune, who lived in the first half of the 20th century, is the art of changing consciousness at will. Magic, in that sense, is a lot like meditation, or therapy, or psychedelics. It feels a bit mysterious, maybe even ridiculous to those who don't practice it. But for those who do, it's a tool to change the way they interact with the world. At the end of the day, what is witchcraft? It's about finding alternative systems for processing the world around you, for connecting to the earth, and for healing something in yourself or something in somebody else. This is what I want painting to do. This is a project that, like the self-portraits, is a kind of meditation to find my way forward. This is And I gave this prompt to my workshop, which is to make a painting of today's weather using 3 colors. So this is small, you can see it, it's the bricks outside my studio. And it's a quick painting, a quick meditation, but it's a way to bring myself to presence and consciousness, to the light, the feeling of the atmosphere against my skin, and to try to translate that in as concise a way as possible. Poetry has many forms, and I would say this is probably closest to a haiku, a simple, single image that is meant to have power. A week or so ago, on this very stage, I heard the writer and curator Helen Molesworth talk briefly about the paintings of Lisa Yuxkavich, who has a piece actually in the gallery as a former fellow. Helen spoke of her embodied response to Lisa's work when she was writing about it, to what I'd call the erotics of the painting. And Helen emphasized the connection she feels between her vagina and her brain when she looks at the work, and how it ripples through her whole body. I understand what Helen means, and she made me rethink my embrace of the idea that I was searching for poetry. Because I think what I'm really searching for is the erotic. I chose poetics because it's a more polite word. Or less complicated. And certainly more serious than magic. But erotic is a word that's been emptied of meaning by sloppy usage. It's not originally a synonym for sex, although it's certainly become that. Plato conceived it as a fundamental human creative impulse having a sensual element. So that's what Helen's talking about, looking at a painting. Audre Lorde conceptualized it as power, a power that rises from our deepest and non-rational knowledge, a power from the body, and a power that we're warned against using. It is a power that is actively contained by our culture. And the British artist Maggie Hambling is often quoted saying, if you're going to be an artist, you have to make your art your best friend. So whatever you're feeling, you can go to it. If you're tired, bored, happy, randy, sad, you go to your work and you have a conversation. In each of these examples, we're encouraged to embrace our senses, embodied response, and knowledge that arises holistically through our entirety. As a teacher, I've long known that becoming an artist has less to do with teaching technique or building skill, and more to do with cultivating self-awareness. That's really easy to say to a grad student. Like, you gotta become more self-aware, and it's really hard to do in your own studio. For most of my life, self-awareness has also been a rational process. It's the talking cure. Even when I'm sorting through my emotions. It's been a process of the mind, not of the body. That habit, I think, is why I've been so out of balance. What I'm seeking now is what Audre Lorde named our deepest non-rational knowledge. And I'm quite certain as I learn to trust it, my work will again begin unfolding in ways that surprise and delight, and perhaps even heal. So thank you.
Can we please have another big round of applause for Pete Hocking, for Joan Wickersham, and for Rowan Ricardo Phillips. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite the three of you back to the stage, and we can do a little Q&A with the audience. If thank you.
That was great,
Thank
you
Tom.
two. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pete, that was great.
I could listen to the two
Joan,
of
that
you
was great.
all day.
Okay, I don't know what I'm standing up here for. I'm going to move over. Anybody have a question for our...
So this is for Joan, and I had to write it down, and I don't have my glasses, so just bear with me. Can you talk more about what it felt like when you first saw the shipwreck? Did you know immediately that you were, touched enough to maybe do some writing or make a book? And then my second question is that I imagine there's a lot of large format photographs that are not in your book, and I'm curious what you're going to do with those.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. The first question about how did I knew right away. I was so excited when I saw it because I felt immediately this paradox that if it had done what it was built to do, it would have been destroyed in a sea battle, or it would have been, had a little career as a warship and then gotten broken up for firewood. It never would have, we wouldn't be seeing it unless it had been, I thought it was the microphone. Unless it had been a complete failure. So I was fascinated that this incredibly successful museum object is only there. We only know about it because it was a disaster. And I was fascinated by that paradox of success and failure. And I was also fascinated by the idea that if it had done what it was supposed to do, it would have also been impermanent, and it became a kind of permanent object. And yet, even as a permanent object, its future is hazy because of this environmental impact. They're constantly having to repair it and change the climate, and even the preservation techniques that they did in the 60s, which were all very innovative because no one had ever done anything like this, some of them preserved the ship, but they also created future disasters. So for example, they sprayed it with chemicals, but now they have to deal with the aftermath of those chemicals. And so it's precarious. The fact that it's this huge, solid, gorgeous thing that is so endangered. I mean, what does that remind you of? So I think it really it spoke to me in ways that I didn't understand, and I think I wrote because I could feel the power of that, but I didn't quite yet know what it was. The photographs. I'll just quickly answer that question. Adam Davies, who is a brilliant photographer. He was a fellow here in Provincetown, and he teaches sometimes in the summer program. He and I happened to be here the same week in 2018, I think, or 17, something like that, 18. And I saw his photographs, and I immediately thought I'd love to see what he would do with Vasa. So I waited a year, spoke to him the following year because I just was too shy. And he actually ended up going, we went to Stockholm together, we got a grant, and we created these, he created this incredible body of work inside the museum, and also we went around Stockholm together and did a lot of work together. And so we've had these 2 online exhibits during the pandemic, and we're hoping to have more as time goes along. We'd like to show our work together. So thank you.
So this message is for Pete to start, but then actually for all three of you, wondering about the creative process. And it seems like all of you have almost multi-hyphenate ways of being creative. Joan's book, Rowan's poems. And so Pete had been talking in workshop about what it is to be working in art and how you are maybe defined by others or not. But I wanted to ask you to talk to us about how you see the infinity of nature, but also the definitions that people write reviews or of all of your work. Terrible question. I have not enough coffee.
So I think I understand what you're asking, Ali. And, I immediately think about something. When I graduated from art school, it had been drilled in me, I don't know others' feedback, but it had been drilled in me that I was an artist. And I went to my first job at Brown University and, was working with a lot of other people who had just graduated from college. And they were like, well, I studied poetry in college, but I don't get to call myself a poet. Why do you get to call yourself an artist? And I think that there's this funny thing about how this identity is handed, how it gets applied to some bodies and not other bodies. And how you wrestle with it in terms of what it means for who you are holistically. And, I went to some, effort to lay out my, part of my CV of like, I have these multi-hyphenate ways of being in the world. Because I think it's really important for us to show our facets. And to understand, I can't be a good painter without being a reader, which comes from my practice as being a writer. And all of these things interact with one another. So I don't know, maybe toss it to, I feel like I'm just stumbling, so.
Well, I do think that if you spend time with artists you love, you find that they are multi-hyphenate by nature. It's a very kind of contemporary phenomenon that people are in these silos of making art. Great poets wrote great art reviews or translations, and great painters wrote great essays, et cetera, et cetera. Even sometimes the letters of musicians and everything like that. And when I was, a young man at Brown University, digging in the crates and kind of the John Hay and all of that, I just was enheartened and invigorated by the fact that you don't have to only think about the silos or the lanes that are left out for you by institutions, which I think is what was buried in your marvelous talk, that institutions lay out lanes for you that aren't necessarily real. And the wonderful thing about art is that when you're thinking about your art in your 20s or your 30s or your 50s or your 60s or your 70s, that what's contemporary gets old really quick. So the important thing is to make. For instance, poetry just means making, poiesis from the ancient Greek. It doesn't mean to make or thing made, making. It's a process. So it's really important to make and trust that people will find it like a ship and do something with it, But the last thing that I've wanted to do is have my identity defined by an institution or a degree. It's just we should be multifoliate and kaleidoscopic yeah, it's the only thing that really kind of makes sense to me. They're all kind of like syllables and provocations and things like that, so.
For me, the most important thing is always to find the right form or structure for the particular obsession that I have. So with the Suicide Index, I actually worked on that for years as a novel, and it was very polite. And I realized this is not a polite subject at all, and it's not a narrative subject. And so it was when I came up with the form of I wrote the book in a kind of index form where it's organized as a series of alphabetical entries, which is very cold and numb. And then I could write passionately about this thing that I needed to write about, and that the form was true to the material. It was the right way to express that material. And I think I'm always looking for that. What it's like a chicken and egg thing, that if I find the right form, I can get at the material, but I can't just plop some random form or genre on top of it. I very much agree with what you've both said, and I would go further and say that genre itself, I think, is a cage that nobody really needs to be in, and I'm kind of glad that that's starting to change. You know, with this Vasa book, I don't know what it is really, and that seems to me to be okay. And I feel the thing that you're told as a writer is, but where are they going to put it in the bookstore? And I just feel like, well, I don't know, but that they'll figure it out. I don't think I should have to define myself based on what.
They'll put it in the
shelf
African
goes
American
on.
literature section. There. That's where they'll find it.
So this is a question for Peter. I love that you reminded us, or that saying of, you know, art can be a best friend, that we can seek solace in our art. Sometimes I think we expect a lot from our art, so I have one of those questions. You know, you mentioned the poetry, the divinity, and the erotic can be found. And my question is, do you think it can be found in the process as well as the end result for yourself and viewers?
So I would say that increasingly I don't understand the difference between process and product. And I think that that's, again, one of those things that, you know, being process-oriented became very hip at a certain point, that everything was process, 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 which I think was a response to modernism in some ways, where, you know, the plastic arts certainly got like commodified in a new kind of way within markets. And a way for artists to protect themselves was to talk about their process. But when I think about what I make, I think constantly about how it's going to live in the world. And what I'm always fascinated by is what I refer to in there when people come to tell me that the importance of a painting that they've bought of mine is that it allows them to hold this place close to their heart when they're in Chicago or San Francisco or Hong Kong or wherever my paintings go to live in the world. I realize that that's part of the process of the object moving through space and time, which is a release from my hand, but it is, when I'm very, very lucky, something that comes back to me through story.
Thanks. This is a question for Pete. I'm not sure if I can say this quite clearly, but the self-portraits that you showed, that what you said about them was, I think, that these represented the way certain people objectified me. But they're also very powerful, and you also talked about wanting to connect with your own body and finding a source of power in your own body that is linked with the erotic. So can you say more about, I mean, are those self-portraits disempowering or empowering? And where do they fit into your doing landscape? Does that make sense?
That's a lot. So I would say that they make me feel very vulnerable. And I think that's ultimately on the path to empowerment. What I'm also talking about tonight is the idea, what we've just been talking about being labeled. And part of what I'm unraveling in my life is the way that people have pigeonholed me in various kinds of ways. One of those ways is the gaze and how I perceive that I've been seen by others. So I'm trying to unpack that these are 3 paintings in what will be a cycle. I mean, when I've shown these paintings, people say, well, you're not making paintings of your body now, like, aren't you gonna, and yes, I am. I mean, there's more. These are retrospective, but there are gonna be some that are prospective and some that are of the moment. So it's a larger project, at least conceptually, depending on, what I do going forward. I think the question of how they relate to my landscape work is also, it's entwined with everything that I'm writing about right now, or that I read tonight. In that, one of the ways that I've been pigeonholed is that, like, I've got an identity as a Cape Cod landscape artist, and that's fraught in all sorts of ways. I will have a lot of people say, "Oh, not another seascape." Oh, I don't mean you, because you're doing something else, But I'm painting the ocean.
You should. Yeah, I was gonna say you should say it's the ocean.
Yeah. I can reframe. But part of this is to spread my wings in the sense of I want to be able to paint anything that I want to paint. And a bit like what Joan is talking about is like I want to follow the threads that appear before me to wonder and delight. That answer?
That seems like a great place to stop with wonder and delight. Can we have one more big round of applause for Pete Hocking, Joan Wickersham, and Rowan Ricardo Phillips? Thank you, everyone. Don't forget, Rowan and Joan's books will be for sale at the back of the room, and they'll be signing their books. Check out the gallery next door and the rest of the books in the bookstore. And come back tomorrow for another faculty event with poet Vivi Francis and printmaker Vicky Tomeko, who I saw in here, Vicky Tomeko back over here. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.